Because Child Protective Services had come to my house when my daughter ran away, I didn't feel like I could call the police because I already had a black mark on me. So for an entire night, I sat up crying, worried about my child, without any help.
When Child Protective Services showed up at her door, Erin Friday faced every parent's worst nightmare.
Get out of the schools!
Today, I sit down with the co-lead of Our Duty USA, an attorney and parental rights advocate.
My daughter believed that she was a male, a boy, after being indoctrinated at her school and suffering through depression and anxiety.
You must change your language. You must use my pronouns. You must look at me differently. You must allow me into your bathrooms, into your sacred spaces.
Friday pushes back on the idea that parents who oppose gender-affirming care for children are driven by hate.
I loved my child so much that I accepted her as being perfect without any need of needles and surgeries. We're not hateful, we're actually loving.
What began as one mother's struggle soon opened her eyes to a larger question. What's really driving the rapid expansion of gender clinics?
Each gender questioning child is worth about $1.5 million to the medical community.
Why is this happening? The easiest one to understand is money.
For Erin Friday, saving her daughter became both a calling and a warning to other parents. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Erin Friday, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So I want to paint a scenario from your life. Your daughter runs away from home. You're thinking about calling the police, but you realize you can't. Child Protective Services has been called on you inappropriately, but you know if you make that call, you'll get a black mark on your record and you could end up losing her. Tell me about what happened and, how it got to that.
Well, it goes back to when I found out that my daughter, who was 13 years old, just starting high school, was secretly socially transitioned at school, meaning that the school started my daughter by a male name, used male pronouns, and when I called the school and told them to stop, that next week, Child Protective Services was at my door. The next day, the police. And that was an immediate alert to me that the school wants to know better than wants to parent my child, and that if I didn't follow and call my daughter a boy, that Child Protective Services may come and take my child away. And at the time, I didn't really know how dangerous the situation was. I later learned that parents in Southern California had lost custody of their children because she wouldn't transition her daughter, she wouldn't call her daughter a male, and CPS took her child. So now I knew that I already had a black mark, and a few months later my daughter ran away. And the normal thing for a parent to do is to ask law enforcement to help find your child. She's 13, female, alone at night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I can't make that phone call because I know that there's already a file opened up on me and that Child Protective Services can swoop in anytime and take my child.
So many things going through my head, at this moment. Is this a kind of blackmail? Like, how do you describe this scenario that if you don't basically follow what these people are demanding of you, you might lose your child?
Well, it's coercion at its highest level. It's telling a parent that you either need to transition your child or you don't get to keep your child. It's forcing a parent to socially transition their child and later medicalize their child, puts them in a position of the worst position a parent could be in is knowing that the government is coming after you because you believe in biological sex. You want to raise your daughter as a daughter that you birthed, that you know no human has ever changed sex, and you have the government telling you, no, you're abusive. You don't get to parent your child. The government knows better. This is America. This is insane.
Hey everyone, I'm going to be trying to get some more sponsors for American Thought Leaders. And the reason is I want to try to get it on more of the non-paywall platforms where we'll use the sponsors to kind of support the show. And one of the sponsors that I really appreciate is American Hartford Gold. You know, these are pretty chaotic times. We're not sure where things are going to go. There has been this, massive liquidity, $6 trillion put into the system. We don't actually know how all that is going to play out. And I like to put my money in a very stable place that also tends to go up. And gold is really the perfect place for that. Now, gold has had a correction recently, and that's absolutely true. But again, if you look at the long-term trend on gold, this is the reason I invest in gold. I'm not like a stock market trader. I like to put my money in a place that's stable and growing. And I actually think this is the exact right time to buy gold because it has gone down a little bit. It's a little bit cheaper, but the price, in my belief, is only going to continue to go up, and that's what I'm actually doing. So American Hartford Gold really is the place to do it. We've worked with them for years. We've had a great experience working with them. They're Better Business Bureau certified and frankly really easy to work with. Okay, so you can call them at 855-862-3377. You can text American to 65532, or as always, click the link in the description below. So it's sort of like they messed with the wrong person here. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. But tell me a little bit more about your background. I'm just kind of maybe to lighten the mood for a moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm no wallflower. I'm a licensed attorney, so I knew what my rights were, and I also wasn't going to be bullied that easily. So I was very lucky. Child Protective Services did not come back to my house. I think I must have told them 7 or 8 times during the interview that I was an attorney, so they moved on to other easier prey, to take parent or children from other parents who wouldn't be able to put up such a fight.
Okay, but tell me, like, you decided to not just be happy with the fact that it worked out. You decided to take this head on.
100%. So as soon as I started to learn about the whole of gender ideology, that these schools were socially transitioning these kids behind parents' back, that the government was promoting this, that young girls were getting their breasts removed as part of this ideology, first I weighed it and I said, who's fighting this? Why isn't where is this in the news? I came from the left. I watched CNN and the New York Times. I didn't see anything about this. And so I was waiting for the cavalry to come. And I joined all these different groups. I joined the radical feminists, and I started just Googling all groups that were fighting this. And I realized that nobody was really fighting for the parents. Mm-hmm. And I made a deal. I'm not sure who the deal is with, but I made a deal that if I could safeguard my daughter from this, which I did, that I would help save other parents and save other children. And that's the deal I made 5 years ago, and I'm a person of my word.
Mm. So, but okay, tell me a little bit more about your daughter. What was her state when this conversation happened, and like when the, Child Protective Services was called? Was she believing she was a boy? Like, where was her head at?
Yes, so this was COVID, and she was isolating, like many of these young girls, living virtually through a computer, avatars. She was going through puberty, not liking the changes that are going on with her body. Cut her long hair, changed from being very feminine to trying to be masculine. Like, it was almost kind of comical. She tried to learn how to burp and would forcibly sit with her legs apart, trying to mimic what she thought a male would do. But it really wasn't funny. She decided that she was a boy, and she made that pronouncement. And when she did, or right around that time, she went into a deep depression. They go into a deep depression because to believe that you're transgender is to believe that you are born in the wrong body, that everything is wrong with you. And the only way to be fixed is going to a surgeon's office. So that's a horrible thing for a young girl to believe, that they are wrong. And so she had those thoughts going through her head. And then on top of it, she's told that parents who don't go along with the gender identity of her choosing are bigots, hateful, don't care for her. And that's all over the internet, that we parents are monsters for not, supporting, affirming their children. And do that to a 13-year-old girl who's going through COVID, isolated, not in school, depressed. It was horrifying for her and horrifying for our whole family.
Did people try to, convince you of, that you were wrong?
Oh, 100%. So I think I went to about 7 different doctors. All of them advised me to transition her. I couldn't find anyone who was curious as to why she felt this way. I only found people who told me that she would commit suicide unless I called her a boy. That was it.
What's the veracity of that statement?
Am I allowed to curse? No. It's untrue. We that's been debunked for a long time. It's used as a cudgel to, again, give parents a Sophie's choice. Live son, dead daughter. I can't tell you how many times I heard that, but it's a lie. These children become depressed and upset with themselves and who they are. They hate the reflection in the mirror because they believe that they're born wrong. It's not because a parent isn't supporting them in that horrible belief. It's actually the opposite. It's hateful and horrible to tell a child you are wrong. And that's when I think the suicidality really is more prevalent. It is post-transition because they're not loved as themselves, which is the person in the mirror, not a creation.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure there's someone that's studied that now. I don't know. I haven't looked at that particular body of literature around the issue, but that makes sense to me, what you're saying.
Well, there is literature on it.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about it. Yeah.
So there's the NIH study, which followed 4 gender clinics in the United States, the biggest ones. In the first year, 2 out of the 315 adolescents killed themselves. Now, these were children who were supported by their parents in their trans identity, were at either UCSF or Boston Children's, the biggest gender clinics in the country, and they committed suicide. Now, those numbers are buried often. We also have studies out of Sweden and out of Denmark. The Swedish study went 30 years back, and it's 19 times higher suicide rate post-surgical transition. So it's a very high rate after.
What's happening with your daughter now?
Well, she's very happy in her female body, thank God, and she's a young adult, and she has all her body parts.
But it was hard at the beginning, I'm guessing, right? Like she really believed that she was a boy. I'm trying to understand like the process to get to the situation you just
Well, they
described.
go through it slowly. It's a very slow process. So it really started when she went to her sex ed class in 7th grade, where they planted the seed, where they spent an hour on gender identity in the sex ed curriculum. It was a 5-hour course. The last hour, all gender identity. And it had pictures, because I looked at it. I looked at the curriculum. It has pictures of a boy body with an arrow pointing, saying girl brain. So it was all based on lies. So that's implanted in these kids, and it is reinforced through school, then it's reinforced through social media. So when a child then is distressed and they're trying to understand what is causing them not to have a big group of friends, or why do they feel awkward or uncomfortable in their bodies, well, they have an easy answer. It's because they're born in the wrong one. And so that is, an easy solution. And you can Google this. You can put in, am I trans? And you'll get a very simple questionnaire. And we're all trans, by the way. If, you'll take the test and you'll be trans too. So during COVID and these distressing times, she took on the identity. She moved along the LGBTQ alphabet. They usually do. They start at lesbian, and then they move to non-binary, and then they move to transgender, and then it lands, and then it's real. And then they go into a spiral, a deep depression, and the anger that these children have towards then their parents is almost indescribable. The hate that she tossed my way was excruciating, but you take it as a parent because when a child is really angry, it's a sign of severe depression when they're yelling at the person who loves them most. It's not that they hate their parents, it's that they're hurting. And but it causes a lot of parents to capitulate because they see their child spiraling down. And then they hear from the medical providers, you must do this. This is the only pathway. This is the way to save your child. So these parents believe it. And I don't blame them. I mean, they didn't read the studies I read. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of searching on the internet to actually understand what was going on.
Well, and they have some trust of the experts too, right? Somehow you were able to see through that.
Right. When you have the American Academy of Pediatrics, the largest pediatric society in the country, saying you need to transition these children, who's the layperson who's going to compete against that? They're not. And even doctors just blindly follow that. They don't think critically. When have we ever treated a mental illness by cutting off body parts? Well, now we do that.
I want to talk a little bit about, you being sort of activated, realizing there's this this terrible world, right, where children are being harmed, and you made the deal. That's interesting. I have a deal like that in my life too. We can talk about it later, I suppose, but you decided you were going to, dedicate yourself. I think that's the way to put it. And one of the areas that you've decided to dedicate yourself is to, helping these families that have had their children taken by Child Protective Services. Tell me more about this picture. I don't remember the term, but there's like a pipeline. Once someone gets pulled, they get pushed into maybe you can kind of explain to me what happens once they get taken by Child Protective Services.
Sure. So what these children are, first of all, being taught through the internet, and actually I have evidence of school counselors telling children how to use Child Protective Services to get away from their parents who refuse to capitulate and call them another gender. And so once that child then gets into the crosshairs of Child Protective Services, the child can be taken and placed in a temporary foster care family. And I like to call them glitter families or chosen families because these are affirming families. And during that interim, the parents are being investigated. And they can be investigated just from not calling their child a male or a female name, whichever the child wants. Once the child is in foster care, there are foster care Bill of Rights in many of the blue states. Those Bill of Rights require that the child be housed based on gender identity, that is, share a bedroom based on gender identity, not their sex. In California, our Child Protective Services goes up to the age of 24. So a 24-year-old male body could be sharing a bedroom with a 13-year-old female body as long as she identifies as a male, or vice versa. So we take a child and put them in a very vulnerable position. The Bill of Rights also allows the child to get sex-rejecting interventions. So now you cast the parents aside. You don't need consent from the parents anymore. You get child and government consent to cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, name change. And parents essentially lose their parental rights to the government as long as those parents refuse to transition their children. So that's how it goes. And these children are taught also to make false claims of abuse, not just emotional abuse, but physical abuse. And these cases, we don't hear about them very often because under law, many laws, they are sealed or there's confidentiality requirements. So nobody knows. The parents can't even go to the press about what is happening to their child.
I understand there's numerous court cases that parents are involved in right now trying to reclaim their children that are in this situation.
There's quite a few cases across the country that in which the parent has sued the child protective agencies or social workers for violating their parental rights. Thus far, those cases have not been that successful. The judges are finding, legal technicalities to avoid really adjudicating whether parents have a right to raise their child as their sex. That's what the question is. Do parents have the right to raise their children as their sex? How they were born, how they were made naturally. So there are lawsuits going across the country, but this is happening in red states and blue states. Georgia has a case going on, and it's very difficult for these parents to keep fighting for the trans-identified child, too. These parents are bankrupt. They are asked to jump through hoops. They are required to be re-educated, go through trainings. And as that's happening, the clock is ticking. And that child is getting more indoctrinated because the child is being placed with a family or in an institution where they're being affirmed as the opposite sex. And the clock is going. So that child is aging. And there's an end time when the child is now an adult. So there's nothing left except tears for these parents. And then there's other instances where a parent, I know a mother in Oregon, I think she has 4 children. She had Child Protective Services open 3 separate investigations against her because of her trans-identified daughter, who eventually ran away. But Child Protective Services still went after her because the child had run away. Police would not return the child back to her. But she has other children. So if she was determined to be an abuser as to this one child, she would lose the others. So this mother, sorry, this is going to get emotional. This mother emancipated, relinquished her parental rights to this trans-identified daughter to save her other 3 children. And that is horrifying. She sacrificed her one daughter to the transgender cult so that she could safeguard her other children. And that should never be, never be.
Why do you call it the transgender cult?
Because that's exactly what it is. It has all of the attributes of a cult, except there is no one supreme leader. The supreme leader is self. So a cult, what does a cult do? It indoctrinates you with mantras. Trans women are women. Trans kids, deserve rights. So you have, these mantras. You have forced education. You have the pulling away of the family. I mean, that's the biggest thing from a cult, right? Separate the people who truly love the victim and separate them. Create a new family, a new community for them. And then the supreme leader is self in this cult, because trans-identified people want you and want the parents to all speak the way they want you to speak. You must recognize that man is actually a woman, that woman is actually a man. You must change your language. You must use my pronouns. You must look at me differently. You must allow me into your bathrooms, into your sacred spaces. It's a cult, and it's a social contagion through the cult.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about this social contagion aspect. I mean, it's been covered. Abigail Schreier has written on it quite a bit. But do you know at this point, as we're recording, what the status of that contagion is? Because during COVID, there was sort of an explosion of it, if I recall, right?
Yes. So there's been some reporting that there's been a dip. There's at least a dip in youth saying that they're non-binary. But I don't see any slowing down of the trans identity whatsoever. The social contagion is rampant, and it started first with the girls, which is normally how social contagions work. Anorexia, bulimia, we know this going back to the laughing social contagion, the dancing social contagion, hysteria. It always started with the young girls because they want to be liked, they're easily influenced, and then it moves over to the boys, which is where we are now. But it's continuing. They want the social contagion to continue. This is why they have trans-identified cartoon characters. This is why Disney has it. This is why it's on cereal boxes. Why they're teaching it in TK and kindergarten, is they want to keep building gender-confused children, because it's a steady stream of money, and it's a massive way to blow up the family. Because that's what it does. It destroys the family.
So okay, interesting. You mentioned a few kind of motivation factors here. One is the destruction of the family. That's super interesting, because that's like a core communist goal, right? A sort of, the state asserts control. Okay, what did you mention? You mentioned the family, you mentioned money, right? And there's also this element of just, manifesting the ideology that you've come to believe. I guess that would be another one, right?
Well, when we look at the why is this happening? And it's very multifaceted. The easiest one to understand is money. We know that these children are worth lots of money to the medical communities. I think Tennessee, Vanderbilt, admit it. These are cash cows. These children are perpetual medical patients.
Okay, let me just jump in. I remember seeing these transcripts, right? That's shocking to me. Can you just explain what happened? What did they admit to? How did they admit?
Well, they talked about how lucrative gender clinics are. Let me put this in perspective. Lupron, which is a puberty blocker that is surgically inserted into a child's arm to prevent them from growing up. that can cost up to $150,000 to insert that. Hospitals, profit margins are very, very razor thin. $150,000 to insert a puberty blocker into a child and then repeat, visits, and then you put them on cross-sex hormones, and then you have surgeries. I mean, these children are worth a lot of money. And then all the harms that come from that, because there are many, even if the child doesn't detransition. There's a lot of things that happen to the body when you put females on male-level testosterone. Cancers emerge. So they are always paying dividends to the medical community. So the money's there for these surgeons and for these hospitals. And they knew it. And they ran with it. It's a good profit center. And our government paid for it. Medicaid.
Until recently.
That's right. But in California, we're still paying for this.
I just remembered something. You mentioned something earlier, the term that people might not be familiar with, and you said sex rejecting, and I think you're referring to sex rejecting procedures. This terminology that I think Bobby Kennedy was first used in his address when they introduced this new report, the umbrella study of all the studies on gender dysphoria treatment and so forth. So this is this terminology is not something I'd heard before. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, we wanted to take back some of the language because the language has been manipulated. Gender affirming care, brilliant. Gender affirming care, it has a nice ring to it. That we all have a gender. Sorry, but I don't believe any of us have a gender. A gendered soul, we have a sex. We are sexed human beings. That's it. So we wanted to find terms, especially lawyers. We have to be very careful how these judges are coming down with these rulings. There's no such thing as a trans child. I don't use that terminology because it's a fiction and it makes it real. So there's no such thing as gender affirming care. There's only sex rejecting care, which is you're rejecting that you are a male or a female, what you actually are. And you're trying to make your body mimic the opposite sex. So it makes perfect sense to use the right terminology so people can hear it. You're rejecting your body. You're not affirming anything, you're rejecting.
So, you're in California, as you just mentioned. There's been a pretty significant shift in how the federal government approaches this issue. I'm just wondering if you could tell me what has shifted, and then the second part will be what impact has that had at the level at which you operate?
Well, thank God for President Trump. Never thought those words would come out of my mouth, but here we are. Super appreciative of what this administration is doing. So the federal government, for the Department of Ed, the Department of Education, has come down very hard on California for Title IX violations. Now, we're all in litigation with this, so we'll see where it goes, but we're very likely to be successful in withholding federal dollars because California allows men to be in our bathrooms and in our sports. So that's one big thing that the administration has done. Because of the administration with the executive orders, we've had a lot of gender clinics at hospitals shut down. Now, on paper, that is a huge win, and I don't want to underestimate, we want to celebrate that. But these doctors have just moved over and put up shingles elsewhere. So they're still doing it. They're just doing it not connected to a hospital. The DOJ is investigating California for, some of these false medical ICD codes that they're using to hide the fact that they're performing sex-rejecting interventions on children.
You're going to have to lay that out for me a little bit more. So it's something to do with how the procedure is being described, but it's just being described fraudulently. Can you just unpack that for me?
That's correct. So they'll put a code in for a woman and say that he, even though it's a female, is not producing enough testosterone and is, testosterone deficient, and use a code for that. Well, that's not true, because women are not supposed to have that level of testosterone. They will use codes such as endocrine disorder unspecified to give a child puberty blockers, to hide the fact that they're blocking a child's puberty because that child or parent believes that that child is a different sex. So they're manipulating data, and that's illegal, and the federal government is going to come down hard and swift on that. The Federal Trade Commission had a roundtable in July where they allowed all of us to come and speak and talk about all the fraud and deception, and we're waiting for the FTC to start moving on it. But we parents and other advocates, we have been stockpiling evidence for a very long time, and we finally get to share it because it is a lie that gender interventions are life-saving. That is a lie. It is a lie that they are medically necessary. And that's the purview of the FTC, is you cannot do that. You cannot say that a treatment is life-saving when it's not.
So, and this is what's being litigated, these questions, right?
Some of it's in litigation,
yeah,
and some of it is beginning. So the FTC, I think, served 20 plus subpoenas on different hospitals. And I know that this administration has really two strong edicts, which is immigration and gender. And they're following through with the gender piece. And they're using every tool at their disposal to shut this down, even in blue states.
Well, so that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. You mentioned, of course, there's a whole bunch of litigation that is now having the state versus based on what the federal government wants to be doing in California and a host of other states. But let's talk about California, because that's your jurisdiction, let's say, or your prime jurisdiction. What impact has that had on what's happening on the ground in California?
Well, it has, first of all, lit a fire under parents who used to be more frightened to speak up, but they're speaking up and they're filing more lawsuits, and they're calling school boards to task for socially transitioning their children. So we see a big shift on that level. We see at least parents now getting more in the news, seeing more in the news that they don't have to just transition their child if their child is suffering from gender confusion. So we see a lot of that. And it's a lot more fun. I mean, I have to admit it. I go to Sacramento. I've been going to Sacramento for 4 straight years, losing. And it's very fun to testify on some of the California bills and let them know that this is what's happening with the federal government. And it's not as simple as this, but I can pick up the phone and tell the federal government this is what's happening here in California. And they're reacting.
Basically, you have some leverage that you didn't have before.
Absolutely.
For a moment earlier, you sounded like you weren't hopeful. Because this sounds hopeful, you just told me, right? But before you said, I don't see the levels of this changing. Right?
Well, there's been some reporting that the number of children saying, or adolescents saying they're non-binary has dropped, and that the social contagion is at its peak and starting to come down. I don't see the number of kids saying they're trans-identified dropping. The non-binary is different because there were a lot of kids who took on that label because they wanted to be in the oppressed bucket. And so they really didn't have an issue with their sexual identity. They just wanted to be part of that club. And that club isn't as cool anymore but they're still indoctrinating these young kids. And the children that fall prey to this, they're autistic. They're already
or tend to be, right?
Right. I mean, they fall into a bucket. Like, I can truly have, and I have parents call me, and all they have to do is tell me the sex of their child and their age of their child, and I can pretty much tell their story because it's all the same. It's different for boys. It's different for girls.
Okay, so what is that story?
So for the girls, so if it's a young girl, it falls into a pattern. She has ADHD, maybe autistic, not a lot of friends, maybe into anime, spends a lot of time on the internet. So those are the girls. Mm-hmm. And as part of a friend group, mm-hmm. where the friends are also non-binary, trans, whatever they are, or maybe lesbian. For the boys take on a different, everything's binary. Really, the boys are different. Many of the boys are, they have genius IQs. They have autism, usually Asperger's, which I don't know what the term they use now, but so they're very, very intelligent. Never had a girlfriend, socially awkward, very into computers, very mathematically minded. They take on a different, and then we have the older females, which tend to be the same-sex attracted women who just want to go through life instead of being a masculine-looking female, have shame and decide that they are actually a male, because it's easier sometimes to go through life as a male than it is a female that has male attributes. So they all fall into different buckets, and there's certainly a pattern. And I actually had 150 parents write letters to the American Academy of Pediatrics trying to get them to stop their policy and at least take a look at it, do a systematic review. And what I didn't know, I had all the parents CC me on the emails that they sent to the AAP, and then I put together a chart of the stories of the parents to match them up. And the patterns are very clear. I mean, it's not scientific, but the patterns are really clear. Who got caught in the net? It's not the child who is playing sports and has a whole group of friends, and there's a pattern.
With respect to these lawsuits that involving the removals by Child Protective Services, you said they're not necessarily going well. What do you think is going to happen with this space at this point?
Well, that's where I come in. So a group of attorneys and I have been working tirelessly on writing some legislation that will make it easier for parents to sue these child welfare agencies and the attorneys who represent their children and the social workers who are promoting this and unfairly investigating them. So we're hoping that this legislation will help in these lawsuits and then stop what is happening. We are also working to try to get the federal government to use its power through the HHS, because the HHS funds close to 50% of all of these Child Protective Services agencies. So the federal government has the power to say, we are no longer going to fund you if you are taking children from otherwise fit parents. And, which is really, really important, we are no longer going to fund the training that all these social workers are going through that trains them that parents like me are abusive. There's money going to training of judges in the same way. So the gender ideologues, they have been training judges for decades.
I mean, it sounds like this is sort of embedded in almost every aspect. I mean, this is why there's a pipeline, I guess, as you would call it, right?
Every institution has been invaded by gender ideology. And we have to root it out.
And so a starting point for you is this kind of legislation.
Yes.
What's the name of your group?
Well, we're a coalition, but I'm the president of Our Duty, and I'm working with other attorneys in this space, a retired judge who worked in dependency and family court, so it's very nice to have an expert. But we're trying to figure out the easiest way and the quickest way, because I get a phone call a month from a parent saying that they're losing custody of their child because they won't transition them. I have parents that I tell them, run. Child Protective Services comes knocking on your door and you live in a blue state, get in your car and drive as quickly as you can to Florida, Texas, but do not remain in Oregon, Washington. You will not win. You will lose your child.
It's difficult to fathom. Very difficult to fathom.
It's insane. This is the United States. And we have parents having to flee with their children. I even had a family flee to Poland. She asked, where can I go? And she said, I can go back to Poland. I said, go. You need to leave. You're not going to beat this behemoth. The courts are against you. They are, and it's not as if the judges are bad people. They are trained. They are trained also to follow just what the social worker says. Follow what Child Protective Services says. They're going through hundreds of cases. The recommendation is, can I read the recommendation?
Sure.
Yeah. This is from an actual case in Colorado. This is the recommendation for Child Protective Services to these parents of a child who thinks that she is a boy. The requirement is that the parent and family will be affirming of the child's chosen gender identity. Forced transition. The parent will not make any negative comments regarding the child's gender expression, about her wearing, but they use his, male clothing. The parent will allow the child to go to a friend's house if he feels he needs space from home. The parent and child will attend family therapy to better understand and navigate the child's transition. And the parent will visit the Rainbow Youth Center to be educated about the minor's gender transition and get resources for the minor.
What is the Rainbow Youth Center?
Well, these are these nonprofits. We talk about, the nonprofit in Minnesota with all the child care. Well, there's all these nonprofits in the United States that push gender ideology, and they're, again, being funded by the federal government and by state government, and these are indoctrination centers. And they are there to teach the parent that you are bad unless you transition your child. So this is our government telling the parent you must transition your child or you may not get your child back. This is real. This is, Colorado. I have one from Oregon. I have one from, California. I can get them from every state. This is what they write.
Fascinating. What does Our Duty do?
It's a really good question. We are a jack of all trades. We look at ourselves as connectors. So we are not a parent support group. So when a parent wants to talk about their feelings and their distress, we send them elsewhere. We connect them with attorneys. We help get them into advocacy, teach them how to testify in their state against state legislation, what letters to write, how to safeguard their children, what to say to school boards. We write amicus briefs to the Supreme Court in various districts to give voice to the parents' stories. So we do a lot. We also have what I would call an underground railroad of therapists that we met out to these parents who are looking for non-affirming therapists.
Well, and just so there's just something implicit here to what you said. We didn't really discuss this as so much in this interview. I have in the past, but there's just some significant portion of therapists, child therapists, will just affirm as part of their training, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And there's a large portion of therapists, depending on what state they live in, where the law tells them that they must affirm. And so there are therapists who won't do that, but then they won't take on these clients because they're afraid they're going to lose their license. And we have a Supreme Court case going on right now that will determine whether these so-called anti-conversion therapy laws are legal or not. So in Colorado, California, a bunch of liberal states, therapists are only allowed to affirm a child's gender identity. They're not allowed to question it.
So basically, our duty is a one-stop shop. If you're in any way kind of intersecting into this gender ideology, gender medicine field, and you need help, you guys will find the right person for you if it's not you.
That's correct.
Okay. How do people find you?
It's ourdutyusa.org is our website.
Fantastic. So incredible conversation here. A final thought as we finish?
Well, I'm very hopeful now that I sit in DC that the White House and that Congress is going to continue to safeguard children and look at parents like us, like me, as the best parents and help support us because we need them. And stop forgetting about the blue states. Blue states need help, and the only help that we're going to get is from the federal government.
Well, Erin Friday, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining Erin Friday and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellick.